listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
It's the GM Shuffle, of course, DraftKings Stadium. Come on, Michael Lombardi. Let's go. Week 7 NFL. I'm Patrick Meagher. We got a lot to do over the next hour. We're going to get to the NFL news and notes presented by Smirnoff coming up in just a bit, but we have week 7, Michael. So check this out. As you know, the favorites have been going nuts. The last 2 weeks, 23-5 straight up, 27-1 ATS. Now you've got a favorite on the road, the Broncos laying 3 at the Saints. The look ahead on this was 2.5. Low total on a Thursday night, 37. The Saints are banged up. But I can't be laying 3 with the Broncos on the road, Michael.
You're not going down the Bo Nix road or to lay 3 points? You're not doing that? I mean, no, I can see where you're coming from.
Maybe with Bella's money, not mine.
Yeah, Bella's not doing that one either, I can tell you that. Here's the reality, though. I mean, the Saints are so beat up. And this is where, we've been doing shows for a long time, right? And I've learned a lot from your handicapping. And one of the things I learned is when it looks so obvious, it's probably not as obvious as it looks, right? And so this one sets up like it should be: take the Broncos, lay the points, get out of town. The Saints have 3 offensive linemen that aren't going to play. They got 2 wide receivers that aren't going to play. They're playing a rookie quarterback. They're playing against an old coach who knows the team really well. And Bo Nix was really good in the fourth quarter, had one of the best fourth quarters in the NFL this season against the Chargers, leading them on a comeback. So why not do that? Although it looks too easy, right? I mean, now look, Denver's front's good. There's no question. But Spencer Rattler's not a bad player. I mean, he threw 2 picks, but he showed some flashes last week. I know this Bronco defense has been really bad. This Saints defense. Over the last 4 games, they've given up 1,829 yards. They've given up 457 yards in the last 4 games, right? So they really have struggled, and they can't run the ball offensively. They've only had 127 yards rushing in the last 2 games. So it sets up perfectly for Denver, but that's where the trap is. Like you feel like you're Sonny going to the causeway. There's a trap here somewhere.
I think the tonic for an offense like the Broncos, it would be, or a defense like the Saints would be the Broncos offense. They've got 9 touchdowns this year, all in the red zone. Look, the Saints are without Olave. They're without Rashid Shaheed. Taysom Hill might be out. The right guard is out. The left guard is out. I don't care if the whole entire team is backups. I'm a numbers better. And if I'm getting a home team catching 3 short week for both teams, I'm taking the dog. And I also do like, Michael, because both offenses not necessarily great, I do like in prime time this under 37.5 tonight.
I think that's the right play. I think stay away from the line. I think it's the right play. I really do, because I can't see either team really being explosive, right? Shaheed's was their most explosive player on the Saints. I think, to me, Sutton's the most explosive player on the Broncos. But Bo Nix is kind of like he had the really good game in the fourth quarter, but the game was over, right? And so, to me, it's been a problem, throwing the football in the first and second quarter. He hasn't been accurate. He's missed some easy throws. Last week, he throws a pick in the first play of the game. So, I don't know. The overs on Thursday night are 14-9, and they've been going over by 5.8 points. But I don't think that's the case here. I really don't.
If you look over the big guy's shoulder underneath that gorgeous San Francisco 49ers helmet, you see Smirnoff. NFL news and notes here on GM Shuffle, presented by Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka. Please drink responsibly. Before we get to, I guess something went on with Davante Adams. Can we pour one out, Smirnoff, for Aiden Hutchinson?
We probably
this
need
isn't
it.
in the
Yeah,
rundown, Elliot, but I am depressed. Okay, it's not just about the 7.5 sacks. It's about the QB pressures. That's a big loss for my Lions, Michael.
Yeah, that's the hard one. I mean, losing Aiden Hutchinson. But here's what I think could happen. There's a lot of players that I think are going to get traded here in the next couple of days. For example, if I'm the Lions, the Patriots are trying to move Josh Uche. They'll give him away for a 5th-round pick. Now, Uche isn't as good as Hutchinson, no question, right? He signed a minimum type contract, $3.5 million, but he can run up the field and he can get pressure. What the Lions need to do, really, what they need to do is find somebody who can be a nickel player for them, 3rd down rusher only. maybe they call Philadelphia and see if Philly will dump Bryce Huff, who's been a disaster for them, right? Bryce Huff was good for the Jets in a role, but in Philly, he hasn't been able to find that role. Philly played a lot of money. I doubt they want to do that to a competitor like Detroit. But Uche, you could have him for a fifth. I mean, they're trying to dump him. And so to me, there's a lot of those guys out there. Maybe if the Saints lose tonight, you could trade for Chase Young, who's on a one-year deal. See, to me, if I'm Brad Holmes, I'm going through all these one-year rushers and trying to find a piece here and a piece there, because you're not going to find one player to fill in for Hutchinson. You're going to have to find three. One guy to rush, one guy to play the run, another guy to play on base, on nickel, play nickel runs. You got to have to piece this together. But I would start with Uche. I think he could really help a team in a situation where they're going to get the lead and you can rush.
Okay, Week 7 kicks off tonight in New Orleans. Week 6 closed in Jersey with the Bills. We were talking about this before that game kicked off. The Bills 23-20. They do cover at the Jets. So the Jets said, you know what? It's time to freak out. And they did. Does this ever work? Okay, so Immediately they trade for Davante Adams. Third round could turn into a second rounder. I'll ask you this way. As soon as the trade went down, I'm sure you knew it was coming. What was your immediate reaction?
Well, Monday night, I was up at NFL Films doing the pod with Coach Bill and Matt Patricia, and we had heard that the trade was coming down. So we taped a segment on Monday night because we knew the trade was coming on Tuesday. And then I saw Pat McAfee put out one of those cryptic tweets that said, like he knew something was happening, but he couldn't say it. It's the same thing with me. Like I'm not going to reveal the source on something that I know is going to happen. And so we knew it was going. But I mean, to me, I think it smells of desperation by the Jets, right? I mean, Garrett Wilson is their best player by far. He averages under 10 yards a catch. Davante Adams was a good player at one time. He's older. He's not the same guy. He's going to replace Alan Lazard, right? Will that help them? Maybe. But if they don't protect the quarterback, if Tyron Smith doesn't play better and Morgan Moses doesn't play better, is this really help? I mean, that line got the shit kicked out of them the other night by Buffalo, who was missing Ed Oliver and missing Von Miller. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think, to me, when I look at the Jets, I think one of the things that Joe Douglas has neglected for most of his 6-year career at the Jets is rebuilding the offensive line. He's been so hung up on getting skill players, and he's got some good skill players, don't get me wrong. But to me, the essence of building a team has been really screwed up by him. I don't know how much this really moves. Look, what are the things we know? Did the betting market move at all when this happened? Of course it didn't. The line didn't change at all in Pittsburgh. No. He didn't move the line 1 inch. Meanwhile, and nor did he move the Raider line. The Rams line is going crazy because they think the Raiders have quit, not because they lost Davante Adams. So I don't know. Here's what I will say, and I ask you this question. What is success for the Jets? Like, what does that look like? If they go to the conference championship game and lose, was that a good year? Because next year they're older at quarterback. They're older at wide receiver. Like, they're going to have cap issues. To me, when you go all in, it's either Super Bowl or bust, right? Like, what would you say is success?
No, their success comes down to 2024. It's a 1-year window. And by the way, they tried. It was so concerted and so basic what they tried to do on Monday night. Breece Hall, get him a ton of touches. Garrett Wilson, get him a ton of targets. Guess what? All that happened. And they still lost to the Bills. And by the way, they got a Hail Mary in the mix and still lost to the Bills at home.
Right. That's right. They lost, and they struggled to finish in the red zone. They still had a ton of penalties. They had 11 penalties. Now, the game was ridiculously called by the officials. I grant you that. But there was a ton of penalties on both sides. It wasn't just against the Jets. The false starts, all those things. I mean, to me, look, I think this is an institutional problem. And I think Woody Johnson, who had, who was at the owners' meeting talking, I mean, to me, if he thinks he's turned his culture around in a day, he has no idea what culture looks like.
Look, we worked together for 3 years, and you waterboarded me with culture. I'm all in. I believe you now because I look around and I see the Lions. And I'm like starting to crystallize. I was like, this Lombardi's onto something because I didn't love the Campbell hire at first, and now he could run for mayor, right? And then you look at the Jets, and institutionally, from the inside out is the issue, and that's what you've been preaching.
Yeah, I mean, they have no culture. That's why Belichick was ripping them the other day on the show. It's like Woody's like ready, aim, fire is simply who they are. Like he sits in Florida, and he reads the blogs, he reads Twitter, and he reacts to the fan base as opposed to coming in and saying, hey, this is who we are. This is who the New York Jets football team is. This is what we're going to be. He can't do that. And so he's so naive. He thinks he can flip his culture. Oh, I thought we looked better on Monday night. Well, okay. You lost. Was it better than when you lost to Denver, or was it better when you lost to Minnesota and London? Like, tell me what was better about it. Like, winning is the game here. It's not just we're playing close. Like, they're never going to win. I was talking to an agent yesterday actually, and they're like, when they heard Woody Johnson's comments about, thinking's overrated, they're like, the guy said to me, how could I put one of my really good coaches there as the head coach? Like, he's making ridiculous money as a coordinator. Why would I let him go there? And I said, why would you? Like, to me, it just proves the ownerships are so valuable in this team. I feel bad for the fans because when you have a bad owner that wants to mingle, like some of these guys want to do, your team's going to lose.
Yeah, a good friend of the pod, Bill Belichick, you might have heard of him, said ready, aim, fire on the Manning podcast. And then your boy Woody Johnson said, ready, aim, don't think. Like, what the hell is that quote?
What was that about?
What?
And then he quoted a movie. I didn't even know the movie he quoted. Like, he quoted some freaking movie. Are you serious? What are you talking about? Like, you're making no sense at all. Like, how about having a plan? I could just imagine working for him. I mean, he's like the stuffed shirt. You just know he just breathes that, hey, look, I'm rich. I'm rich. I couldn't even imagine that. That would be brutal. There's nothing genuine about it. Did you get that feel? Like,
no, by the way, they caught up with Salah. He was going to pick up produce at the Piggly Wiggly, and his quote was, I'm living the dream. And he is living the dream. He got away from Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, at least that's right. He did. And he got away from Woody. I mean, that's really important.
Absolutely. All right, we've got a ton to do. Getting started. Fun start. November 5th is the trade deadline, but we've got more trades to discuss when we return here on the GM Shuffle. Of course, Michael Lombardi. I'm Patrick Meagher. We've got week 7 with the Denver Broncos laying 3 on the road, people. What is that number? We're back. GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back to the GM Shuffle, presented by Smirnoff. We do game days. Please drink responsibly. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Okay, we're going to get to week 7, the top games, including the Lions at the Vikings, the Texans at the Packers, which is a good one. But I'd be remiss, Michael, if I didn't bring up your boy, Jared. Remember, what was the quote you gave me about Jerry Jones? He could sell a fish to a cat.
No, he could talk the cat off. He could talk the cat. He could talk a cat off the top of a fish truck. That's the quote right there. And that's true. But I don't think he talked this reporter off the top of his fish truck. I don't think so, man. Whoa, was that? What was that? Like, whoa.
Well, just to be clear, Jerry and his son, they go on local radio every week, which isn't common across the NFL because they want to spread the word about the Cowboys. Cool. They own the station. Cool. But if you're a broadcaster, you have to push back a bit. And that's and it's a dude I know, push back on Jerry. And Jerry said, quote, your job isn't to let me go over the reasons that I did something, and I'm sorry that I did it. Okay, so Jerry was pushing back. I mean, you like to see a little fight, a little juice from your owner, but it does at 3-3 after a historic blowout to my Lions. It does feel a little desperate right now in Dallas.
I think there's been problems going on in Dallas for a while. Not problems within their locker room, but I think Jerry can see the future. And he's a man who doesn't really want to change, right? He likes things the way they are. But I think he knows this is going down the wrong path. Look, he's played at home. They've given up historic points at home. Going back to the Packer playoff game, it's been bad. And I think what we saw on that interview was a lot of his frustrations, a lot of his anger towards the team. He was unhappy after the season. I mean, he was sitting there telling friends and people, why would I pay anybody or give anybody an extension after that performance against Green Bay? Good point. He's right. He deserves that. I mean, he owns the team. They came out and laid a huge egg. Why would you want to give out extensions? I don't think you would expect them after that loss, especially having home field advantage and having not gone to a conference championship game since '94. You got to think this was your opportunity. So I think what we heard from Jury to RJ was a lot of frustration. I mean, I've been on the show. Those guys are good guys. They're Cowboy guys, and they want it to be good. But, I mean, they got to ask the question, like, this team isn't good. And, you and I would always talk about, is it a production problem or a design problem? And Jerry, being the designer of the team, has to take accountability for that. And if you're going to go on local radio and you're going to have a show after the game and a show on Tuesday, you got to figure you're going to get some criticism. I mean, you just can't have it throw softballs up to you. People pay good dollar to come see your team. They want to know what you think about the team. They want to know what your answers are. You are the guy they look to solve the problem. And you can't blame the guy doing the TV analysis or the radio analysis as the problem. He's not. The problem is you did nothing to help your team in the offseason. Your draft, Maisie Smith hasn't worked out at defensive tackle. You have no running game on your team at all. Forget the fact that you didn't sign Derrick Henry. That's insignificant. Who else could you have signed that you could have gone in there and made a good player? So I think, to me, there's a lot of things that creep up. And he said the statement, well, I'm the best. There's nobody could do a better job at GM than I could. He's right, because he controls the money. That's fact. But in terms of the decisions, I think he had to look at his team. I wrote a column last offseason that said this team really overachieved. They didn't underachieve. They overachieved. They weren't that good. I mean, your Detroit Lions should have beat them in there. If it wasn't for the stupid call, they're going to beat them there. They're not good. They hid the fact that they couldn't play run defense through an offense that generated a plus 124 in first half points. So I think Jerry's just really frustrated. I think he's angry at himself, and I think he knows this is going to be a bad year. I mean, look at the numbers. What are they, plus 450 to win the division? I mean, that's ridiculous, right? But I don't know about you. When you and Dustin were doing your guys' show, there's nobody liked the Dallas on the over total in the offseason. It just didn't look right.
Nope. Nobody did. And to be fair, those dudes on radio, they're the voice of the fan. Jerry has to expect it. Specifically, you got beat 47-9. You turned the ball over 5 times. You got outgamed 492 to 251. Like, I don't see answers as they had to abide at 3-3 coming out of that Lions game.
I don't see it either, Patrick. I mean, like, look, they got by beating Pittsburgh, and I think Pittsburgh losing Nate Herbig really affected the game. I know it's one player, but it does. It was a nickel rusher that they would have closed the game out with, along with the great T.J. Watt. So, to me, I think that this is not a great team. They have no run game. Their offensive line's playing some young players in it. And everything falls on Dak, and they can't score in the red zone. They haven't been able to make a play. They gave Brandon Cooks. Look, one thing I said this, you make choices, right? You gave Brandon Cooks that deal. You could have given that deal to Henry. You just made a choice. Right? That was the choice you made. And a lot of that comes back to your design. The design in the offseason, it's the same thing with the Jets. The Jets set in the offseason, and they said to themselves, look, we need a better offensive coach. Okay, they brought Todd Dowling in, but they should have just made Todd Dowling the offensive coordinator and fired Hackett. They didn't want to do that. They needed to improve in the offensive line. They pieced it together with older players. They thought that would work. I just don't see that. I think, to me, a lot of the problems that we see with these teams, the coaches get blamed for it, but a lot of it is the design problem.
Yeah, I'm hearing that you're not putting this on McCarthy right now.
I haven't, because I think, to me, look, Mike's got his faults, and we all do. We're all not perfect. But to me, I don't know how Mike Zimmer could coach the defense any better than what he's coaching it when he has no tackles. And he has really no size at linebacker. Like, I think this is not an overly talented team. Look, I think Will McClay does a really good job of picking players for Jerry. I think they do have some good players, but this team is lacking in offensive and defensive linemen. And it's clear. Now, I know Parsons didn't play, but Parsons was playing when they were giving up yards a lot in the run game. They're not a physical team. Could they be better? Yeah. I mean, I think, to me, there is going to be a lot of competition for the greatest coach of all time just in the NFC East, because, look, if you're the Giants, if you're the Cowboys, and if you're the Eagles, what Sirianni did last week, you're going to be looking for somebody to come in and fix it.
Oh, I just want to warn you, I think you could be losing one of your broadcast partners, Bill Belichick, because there are going to be teams that are going to be thirsty for your boy, and they should have been thirsty in the last offseason.
Yeah, last year. I think the biggest mistakes we make in life, I think, comes down to two words: too late. Too late to recognize the problem, too late to act on it. Jerry, and here's the thing that's interesting about Philly and Dallas, is they recognized the problem. They just didn't want to make a move. Now, the Giants, I don't think they recognized the problem. They were still kidding themselves. But the Jets, they recognized their problems. They just didn't do anything about it. They're too late to solve the problem. And that usually sums it up. When you recognize a problem, we just did a whole seminar on the Daily Coach Network yesterday online, where we had people signed up for it. There's 400 people could sign up for the community class. And basically we went over how to assess teams. And one of the things is you have to take action when you assess the problem. If you don't take action, the problem's not going away. Just because you and I come up with it, say this is a problem, we have to take action on it. But these teams in the offseason saw these problems. They took no action.
Too late. Story of my life, Michael. I'm 46 and single. Let's not go there. All right.
All right.
Detroit's at Minnesota. Let's go to the north, my man. Minnesota's 5-0. Detroit's 4-1. I'll tell you this. Opened Minnesota 1. I've got a 2.5 in the market. Minnesota's getting bet here. Not so fast.
Yeah.
I like Detroit plus the points. Montgomery and Gibbs right now are a freaking wagon. I think there's going to be just short term a little bit of a buoy rally behind the Hutchinson injury. I like Detroit on the road.
I don't understand why. I mean, look, I know Minnesota's coming off the bye. I get that, right? I get that. But, I mean, Minnesota without Aaron Jones, I don't think is the same team. Now, they made a trade for Cam Akers. I get that. But to me, this, and it's hard to run the ball on Minnesota. But if you go back to last year, I mean, they went up there last year. Brian Flores was the offensive coordinator last year, and they moved the football effectively on them up there. I think they scored 34 points on them. And they were able to move the ball. This team can move because they can block. They can go on the road and win. I mean, they ran 36 times for 143 yards last time they played them. So, and they gained 389 yards. I mean, they were very good up there last year. It was a classic game that I think really hurts Minnesota. Is Detroit controlled the ball for almost over 38 minutes in the game. I'm not going against Detroit. I think Detroit has finally. I think the best thing that happened to Detroit was how they played against Tampa, and they realized we can't do this. And as I said on the pod before, you agree too, David Montgomery's a good player. They have backs. I don't know how. I think Darnold, and now they say Hawkinson may play in this game. We'll see if we get him back. But I think Aaron Jones not playing in the game really becomes a problem for him. I think that hurts them.
I think he nailed it.
I really do.
I think he nailed it. And Laporta flashing against Dallas. You can almost feel Johnson. It's like how they handled Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, where you didn't really see much and then they started to build. It's almost like Johnson with Detroit is starting to build this offense. And if they're clicking, they could be historic. Big Daddy has got to be happy with his quarterback. Let's talk about Houston.
No, he's not happy. You can only appreciate this guy.
This love is exquisite, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, you could see. I mean, if I could, I'm going to start reading the text now that you're back on the show, then you can appreciate Big Daddy. I mean, nobody could complain about this as much as anybody. I mean, last week when he was playing the Rams, he sent me a text that said, this is going to be a historically bad day. That was after 3 plays in the game. It's going to be historically bad. And then last week against the Cardinals, they come out with a fast start. And so I text him and say, "Oh, you're awful quiet today. I don't hear much from you today. It's like pretty quiet." Well, we'll see. That's his favorite line. We'll see how it's going to go. I think this Packer team, and without his negativity in my ear, I think this Packer team is really good. I do. I know they got blown out by Minnesota, but I think offensively they're good. I think Houston on the road, I think when you look at them on the road and C.J. Stroud when he has to play on the road, I think they're not the same. Now, look, mixing back is huge because they can run the football. What worries me about laying points with Green Bay right now is Narveson, their kicker. They don't have a kicker, and Big Daddy's been bitching at it to me. They're 5-9 inside the 40-yard line in kicks. This guy's a disaster. Now, they brought a kicker in this week. They got to make a change there. But where the Packers are so good, they've got 90 first-half points. And I just think they're really, to me, I think it sets up perfectly. What do I have here? I got Stroud at 23 starts. He's 8-12 against the spread and 6-3 as an underdog. The other thing I think that favors Green Bay, we talked about this on the Coach Pod. I think the field favors Green Bay. I think it takes away some of the speed. When we come back off the break, I want to pick up on that.
Yeah, I want to discuss that. And bettors, remember, key number of 3, 15% of the time a game is going to be decided by 3. So if you're laying with the Packers, you can find a 2.5. And if you're taking with the Texans, you can find a 3 in the market right now. That's a great game. I look forward to it. When we come back here on the GM Shuffle, we have more. The Chiefs at the Niners, the Jets at the Steelers. GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Okay, GM Shuffle, Michael Lombardi, I'm Patrick Meagher. Of course, smearing off with the NFL news and notes. Let's keep them going. I want to get to the Brady situation. Yeah. And to be honest, and we'll get to it in a second, I actually thought Brady was very good on the Lions-Cowboys broadcast. That could start to change with some of the restrictions. Let's back up, though, as Davante Adams, Michael, is a Jet, which leaves room for Mike Williams, who missed practice because of personal reasons. And those personal reasons are they want to dump him.
Right. Yeah, they definitely want to get rid of him. I mean, Lassard's going to be the number 3. Mike Williams, to me, I feel bad for Mike Williams. He's a great kid. He's had overcome 2 injuries. I mean, Brendan Staley puts him out there in the Denver game that was meaningless, cost him the playoff game against the Jaguars, which they ended up losing. But he's tried to overcome these injuries. He doesn't have the same speed, doesn't have the same explosiveness that he once did. And how could you blame him? I mean, he's 2 years of missing time. So, and his numbers have been trending downward. That's why the Chargers got rid of him. We called the Jets the ifers all year because if they were healthy, they could be a good team. But we know that health and age don't usually go together. I think what I said about Josh Uche and about the trade, Patrick, I think is really going to be something that happens. And I think it has a lot to do with the NIL. These draft picks today, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounders, okay? If you're a 5th, 6th, or 7th and you're a junior playing in some school, you probably come out because you're not getting any money. You figure, I might as well go play in the NFL. I'll make a practice squad. I'll do something. But now everybody's getting NIL. Everybody's making money. So the school can keep you for what's basically more money than a 5th, 6th, or 7th. So last year, we saw 150 players not enter the draft. So it really became, for the first time since we've had underclassmen allowed to enter a draft, it became the first senior-based draft that we've had in a long time. And because of that, I think the value of the later picks is dwindling downward. And so if I could trade a 5th-round pick for Josh Uche, then that 5th rounder doesn't have as much value as somebody who could help me win a Super Bowl this year. It really doesn't. Could I? Of course I could trade down in the 6th or I could trade down in the 4th and get another one. But to me, by the time most of these teams got to the 5th round in this draft, and frankly, the draft before it, it really was watered down. So I think you have to take that. I think everybody looks at the draft picks. This is a 5th rounder. Well, a 5th rounder in 1978 was a lot different than a 5th rounder in 2024. Because, well, a lot of schools weren't being scouted in 1978. You know, there were teams. I mean, the AFL made a living going to black schools and taking players out of those black colleges that nobody else really knew about or scouted. But as evolution changed, they got scouted. And then all of a sudden, there wasn't as much talent at those schools, and they went to schools. So I think, to me, this is about like these late picks. If you could trade, if you're Pittsburgh, and you need an outside receiver and you think Mike Williams has value, he's worth a 5th round pick. His salary's not that much. You take him on, I'm giving away basically a less than a chance of a guy who's going to be on my practice squad, which I could find that at any time. So I think if you're a good general manager today, I'm not saying you want to get rid of your back end of the draft, but to me, if I was a GM today, I'm moving all my picks up to the top 100. I want to get as many good players out of that as I can because I think the risk in the back end of the draft is far greater now with NIL.
That's fascinating. I hadn't thought about it that way. Let's talk about a team that's punting at 1-5. That's the Browns, Michael. They trade Amari Cooper to the Bills. So the Bills will send a 25 3rd and 26 7th round pick to Cleveland for Cooper and a 25 6th round selection. Impact of Cooper on the Bills.
Well, they need an outside receiver. Keon Coleman's not really ready for prime time. But here's the danger. And I don't know how to make sense of it. Cooper was targeted 53 times. He's got 24 catches. His success rate is 35.8. That's horrendous. That's not bad. That's horrendous. So is he dropping? We saw him drop a lot of balls, right? We know Amari Cooper doesn't really like to play in cold weather. That's not his thing. Now it's getting colder. He's played on one side of Lake Erie. Now he's going to play on the other side of Lake Erie. Not so good. But he helps them, and I think he'll have more positive energy. Like this Brown team is fascinating to me. Here they go. They give away, they're the most, one thing about the Haslams, you can criticize them all you want and for good reason based on their decision making, but they spend they're the most, they spent more money than any team. They've done some stupid things, trade for Jerry Jeudy. Really, that was what you wanted, and then extend his contract. But everything they do is based on analytics. This is so fascinating. Everything they do is based on analytics, except when they evaluate Deshaun Watson. Except when they evaluate him, they don't base anything on analytics. Everything else is based on analytics. And yet you wonder, what are they doing? But this move, I think, helps Buffalo. I think it gives them an outside guy. Look, Buffalo's going to be a 12 team. They want to be in 2 tight ends. They finally realized we play in Western New York. We got to run the ball. We got to be physical, which is what they can do. And they've got 2 good backs now, and they've got the best quarterback. I mean, he's going to be dynamic, and he's always a problem. So I think Cooper will help them. I think the Browns are going to have a for sale sign. They lose this week at home to Cincinnati, then I could see them sending any one of those outside rushers that they have on the team to Detroit for a draft pick. I think there'll be sellers in the market. I think you can go in there and get any of their older defensive linemen for any price. They're just going to start collecting picks. I think you're going to see this earlier in the NFL than ever before because the reality of it is there's very few teams that have a chance to win a Super Bowl. There really are. I mean, there are very few. And the Browns ain't one of them. So you might as well sell off assets.
A team that has a chance to win the Super Bowl, the Detroit Lions. I bring them up because Tom Brady has become a part owner of the Raiders. That's going to restrict some of his broadcasting options. We know that. So let's talk about the Raiders in full. Max Crosby. Mark Davis just came out and said this is not a complete rebuild after the Adams trade. Do you believe Crosby is available?
No, I don't believe he's available, although I think there is certainly a lot of problems within that locker room, but I don't think it would cause them to trade Max Crosby. I mean, why would you? You need to keep your good players. I think, to me, Brady coming in is fascinating because, as I said last week, if Brady goes and watches this organization, if he watches the dynamics of how the players can influence the owner's decisions, right? Davante Adams was one of those players. I mean, remember, they all went out to dinner before they fired Josh McDaniels. It was Davante Adams. It was Max Crosby. I mean, that's well known. Right? They wanted Josh out there. He was too hard. They brought Pearson. He was kinder, friendly. We could go to Dairy Queen after the game. We could smoke cigars. But now they realize that Pierce isn't very good. So Brady, the best thing if you're a Raider fan, and I am, the best thing for the Raiders would be is if Mark Davis would finally stop listening to some of these ex-players and listen to Brady. Because Brady's seen what it takes to win. The thing about Brady that's interesting is he went from New England to Tampa. When he got to Tampa, no matter what he says, he understood that the Tampa program really wasn't what he was used to. And as they all said down there, he injected his will to get them straightened out, to find a way to focus and win. Well, that's what he's going to have to do to this team here in Las Vegas. They resented McDaniels for working them too hard. And I'm not defending Josh here because he made mistakes. There's no question. The Adams trade was ridiculous. I said it. It wasn't very good. They trying to build a team around a quarterback that they didn't like, and then they get rid of the quarterback and don't have a replacement. I mean, it wasn't good. I get that. But to me, if Brady wants to change the team, the first thing he's got to do is say, hey, Mark, it's just me and you. Don't listen to anybody else. Nobody else's opinion matters here. Let's build this organization the right way, and let's get it going. And, I think that's their only chance they have. Forget about Brady looking at the quarterback, because when Brady goes and watches the practice and the effort level and the attention to detail from the coaching staff to the field, he might say it publicly everything's good, but he knows better than that. He knows, like I know, that that can't work.
He's so competitive. Let me ask you this. I posit that, of course, he's got a contract from Fox to broadcast for years. What if he just says, you know what, I'm all in on ownership, I'm all in on running this organization, and goes to Las Vegas and decides to do that? Could you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't see him giving up TV. It's $38.5 million a year, right? He's got a 10-year contract for $365 million. I think it's 36.5. And so I can't see that. He bought 10% of the team with a partner, which, what does that mean? But I do think he's going to be overseer of the team. I think he's going to be the voice of reason, which this organization needs badly. I mean, Mark Davis has not made good decisions. Let's be clear. He's been very impatient. he's made bad decisions, including the hiring of John Gruden, who gave him control of the draft and really messed that up. Thought they were going to rebuild it and couldn't do it. So he's really wasted a lot of money on coaches and on personnel people. He needs to get it right. As I said before, he needs somebody to come in there and give him the Raider identity. They've lost their way. They really have. And it'll be interesting to see what Brady does. But I don't know how you can be on broadcasting and run a team. I think that's a challenge. Now, one thing I will say, as you said to start this block, I don't think it's going to affect him. He's going to watch the tape. And just because he doesn't go to practice on Friday, I think he'll be well prepared for the game. And I think he'll know what's going on. But I do think people are going to be worried about him coming in and doing their games when he's got a vested interest in what the Raiders do, especially if he gains more authority at the Raiders, where you could see him, because now he's going to be watching coaches. He's going to be scouting coaches.
Let's be very clear, Michael. He will be picking the next quarterback, Tom Brady, for the Raiders.
Yes.
That's clear.
Yeah, and so he's going to have to get involved with that. And he's probably going to be picking the next. I mean, what's the shelf life for Antonio Pierce? You think he's the long-term solution? I mean, if you're Mark Davis, you're competing against Andy Reid, you're competing against Sean Payton, and you're competing against Jim Harbaugh, and you got Antonio Pierce. Like, do you really think you're in this rate? You really think you're competing against those? And maybe Pierce will turn out to be the next great coach. I don't see it. I think the team's a mess. I think the players say it's a mess. I mean, Adams was one of his biggest supporters, and he wanted out of there. What does that tell you?
Crosby and Adams fired McDaniels and hired Pierce.
That's right.
That is factual. And now Adams has turned. Crosby hasn't been shown. Like, this is a mess right now.
Right. And it lays at one person. It's Mark Davis because he listens to the players. Like, it's one thing to be the owner of the team and have a relationship with the players, but you don't want to listen to what they think because, players want to take the path of least resistance. Like, nobody wants to work hard. I find it ridiculous.
Yeah, I do too. All right, news and notes presented by Smirnoff here on the GM Shuffle. When we return, we've got the NFL Week 5 top games, including the game of the weekend, the North, baby. The Detroit Lions at the Minnesota Vikings. We'll discuss that one and more coming up here on the GM Shuffle. Michael Lombardi, I'm Patrick Meagher.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
GM Shuffle, Michael Lombardi, I'm Patrick Meagher. Before we pivot Week 7, just quickly, let's finish up your point on the Texans at Green Bay. Here's my thing about the Texans. I just think they're a little overrated in the market right now. Yes, the record looks good. I just don't know if they're a team that's being presented how they are in the market. I think there's a wonderful spot with Green Bay staying home after the Cardinals. A second half, they didn't have to struggle. Laying 2.5, I like the Pack.
I do too. And let's just go about, why don't we talk about the field, right? That field in Green Bay, if you don't wear 7-inch spikes up there, it's going to be a problem. And it slows you down a little bit. I think there is a factor there when you're trying to rush the passer. And one of the things that Houston has is two really good edge rushers, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. And I think that helps them. And Green Bay's a very good pass blocking team. The other concern I have about Houston here is, Diggs averages 10.6 yards a catch. Dell averages 9.7 yards a catch. Dalton Schultz is at 7.9. Where do they get their explosive plays without Nico Collins? Like, this is a game they need Nico Collins to explode in, and he's not going to be playing. I don't know where they get that. I think that becomes they're not a great third down team. I just think it's a harder game. I think C.J. Stroud has played good. I don't think he's at a level that everybody wants to put him at. He's not a top 5 quarterback as of right now, based on how he's played this year, especially on third down. I think this is Green Bay. Love is so dynamic throwing the ball down the field. These receivers are explosive. I think it's a challenge to play them. And if Green Bay plays from in front, they're really tough.
We're going to get to the DraftKings best bet. Let's just quickly kind of summarize what's happening in London. So New England, they go there with May, who had a nice second half. Some of those interceptions, not his fault. But Jacksonville in a bad way right now. They're laying 5.5 in London, 41 on the total, Michael.
Well, I mean, if Jacksonville doesn't win, Doug should just stay over there, try to apply for a job at the War Cabinet Rooms with Churchill. I mean, because they really going to bring them back? I mean, seriously, how do you bring them back? The season's over. They're going to be one of those teams you look forward to see if you can find players. It's going to be rainy there. It's going to be a very rainy day. Now they can close the roof there, but you can't close it all the way, and it's going to be very windy in the stadium. So I think this is a weather game, believe it or not, in London, and so that'll be a factor. I just think, to me, if they don't win this game, the Jaguars secondary should be healthier now, but they can't play pass defense. But the one thing about this is the Jaguars are built with two rushers, Walker and Allen. If they can't rush against this really shitty New England line and put pressure on New England, I don't know how New England scores on anybody. New England's going to have to run the ball, control the clock to win the game. I just don't see that. I think I would lay the points with Jacksonville here. I don't like it, but I think I would.
Michael, Kansas City's 5-0, somehow, some way. San Francisco's 3-3. The 49ers welcome the Chiefs, and the Niners laying a point, up to 1.5, a big total at 47.5.
Can't you see everybody just teasing the Chiefs, Patrick? I mean, they're going to be the most popular tease. You take the Chiefs, you get it above 7, you put them in with some other game. Look, Andy Reid's 21-4. We've heard this stat all week long. They're 21-4 against the spread. I think, to me, it's one of these games where they are so good on defense. Now, in the Super Bowl, which is a game we have to go back and watch, they were able to run the ball. I think they had 33 carries for like 110 yards in that game. They could run it a little bit, but this defense is hard to run the ball on. And I think, to me, ultimately, they're going to have to figure out balance, San Francisco, because Kansas City's defense can smother you. And without McCaffrey, it just makes it seems harder and harder to do that. Now, this is a challenge for San Francisco's defense, because the tackles for the Chiefs are the weak point, right? Taylor lines up in the backfield. Moses over at left tackle is not very good. They've got to be able to put pressure on. And I think you can play man-to-man against the Chiefs and win. You got to cover Worthy on the deep ball. But, look, Reed will have something for him. It's Sorensen's going to have to adjust the game out. And if he can, I think they have a chance in this one. But like you said, the Chiefs haven't played good all year, and yet they still keep winning. The key, though, is San Francisco has to move. San Francisco has to move Mahomes, not sack him. You got to move him off his spot. And that second play with Mahomes is the one that kills you. It's when you let him out the pocket. You have to rush him a certain way to where you can keep him contained, because when he gets out there, then you have nobody that can cover anybody.
I promise this is not conspiracy, but are we going to see McCaffrey this year?
I think we will. He went over to Germany. I don't know what he did over there, but, they have looser restrictions on some of they don't have the FDA, but I would assume we will. I mean, he's got the bad wheel, but I heard he was coming back sooner, but then he must have had a setback. I don't know. But,
it was Oktoberfest in Germany.
Yeah. I mean, they just redid his contract this summer, so they didn't anticipate this being a problem.
Question, are the Eagles good? That Cleveland game, let's be fair, and now here comes the Eagles laying 3.5. I got a book showing 4.5 at the Giants.
Right, and that line opened up at 5. It went down to 3. But I think the Andrew Thomas news has moved this line back in favor of Philly.
You called that.
Because now they have both tackles are disasters, right? Illuminor is going to have to go over and play left tackle, which means Evan Neal's coming in to play right tackle. If Evan Neal doesn't start at right tackle, then Joe Shane's going to have to admit he blew the pick. I mean, that's just fact, right? So to me, I think that's the issue. I think the Giants can't cover. You got to block them. The Eagles should be able to. Now, Jordan Mailata's not going to play at left tackle. That's a problem for the Eagles. But to me, this is a statement game for Philly. They should be able to. I mean, if it's at 3, I thought that was ridiculous, but now, as you said, it's getting up to 4. I think that's more like it. I don't love Philly. They're so inconsistent, but I do like them in this game.
So you always expect that coach gets fired, bounce. Bettors have known this angle forever. It didn't turn out for the Jets on Monday night. I think the bounce comes with an invigorated Rodgers, with Adams coming this week. And on Sunday night, the Jets go to the Steelers. And right now I've got most shops. I mean, this is all over the board as far as a number. I've got a couple of shops showing Pittsburgh laying 1.5. I got a shop showing the Jets laying 2. So where are you with the Jets and Steelers here?
Well, look, I think Russell Wilson's going to debut. I was watching some of the clips on Twitter at their practice. He looked like he was taking the reps before Fields. So I think we're going to see him. I look, this is a game I think the Jets should be able to win. This Pittsburgh offensive line is beat up. They lost Zach Frazier last week against the Raiders. He came out in the game. They've got backups. The only one who's stayed healthy is the left tackle. So they've been moving people around in the offensive line. I think that's problematic. If they play Wilson, can he get away from it? One thing about Wilson we've learned is he's had a hard time working the ladder, climbing the ladder in the pocket. He's kind of wanted to run and scatter away. And I think that's going to be an issue. I mean, the Jets should be able, if they can protect up front, and without Herbig in the game, and I don't know what his status is, but now you just got to take care of TJ Watt. But that was easier said than done. The Raiders, all they had to do was take care of TJ Watt. And he forced 2 fumbles in the game, took the game over. I mean, seriously, TJ Watt should be in the MVP conversation. I mean, we can give it to a quarterback if we want, but this guy is as good as any player in the league. I mean, it's too. Go ahead.
Sorry, Michael. I think he's like literally in the conversation of best player in the NFL, regardless of position. He just changes the
exactly.
game.
I mean, it's like he destroys the game, and it's kind of interesting because everybody goes in there. We're not going to let TJ Watt beat us, and what do? I mean, he beats us. It just, you see it all the time. It's too much, and I think he's too good of a player. I don't see how you could just say he's the best defensive player. I think he's the best player.
It's time for the DraftKings Bet Highlight presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Okay, Michael, we're going to take a look at your pick. Now, Miami's at Indy. Shout to Elliott. Right now on the board, we have TBD on the quarterback, but it looks like it is going to be Anthony Richardson's returning. And I got 3.5 with Indy laying it and 43.5 on the total.
I can't look. I'm not in love with the disc jockey down in Miami, as you know. I mean, what point does he start coaching his team? But to me, this is a must-win for Miami. I mean, they've had bye week. Huntley's had more time to learn the offense. They should be able to throw the ball effectively. I mean, at some point, they got to play well. And if you can't run the ball on Gussie's defense, when are you going to run the ball? Like, this sets up perfectly for Miami. Run the ball on Gussie, make a few plays. Your defense can stop. All you have to do with Richardson is stop him from making that long throw. Make sure Pierce, you take him out of the game, but make him have to put 2, 5, 6, 8 good plays together. He can't do that. You should be able to run the ball. I think that the Colts are kind of beat up. I know they've won 3 of the last 4 games, but to me, I think this sets up really well for Miami. I don't like to bet on the disc jockey down there spinning his records, but this one should be one he can get. It really should. I mean, at some point, when does he become a good coach? We love him because he's so nice and he says quirky things. But to me, let's see if he can do something here.
Take the hook with McDaniel. McDaniel feels like the dude you'll be talking to him about football, and then he'll just start asking you about dinosaurs. Like, dude, just chill. At some point, you just got to stay in your shoes, bro.
Yeah, and can you get to, seriously, your pants look ridiculous on the side. Like, at some point, remember those old clips of Vince Lombardi on the sideline with his pants rolled up? You're like, what's he wearing? McDaniel's brought those back. Seriously.
Before we say goodbye, just quickly, this is selfish because I'm going to bet this game. Maybe a buy low spot on Seattle, sell high in Atlanta. Do you have a thought on Atlanta laying 3 with Seattle coming?
I'm all over Seattle in this one. I might use one of the. I might use Seattle as my first pick in the Russo contest this week because I think Seattle is. Look, everybody thinks Atlanta's good. If Geno Smith gets time, now this is one of the worst pressure teams in the National Football League, the Seattle Seahawks. I think it could be a track meet. I think this could be a back and forth game. Don't get me wrong, but I really believe that Seattle getting 3 is a good play. I like it. I think it'll come down just like all Atlanta games do is come down to the final minute. I think McDonald got to get this defense to play better. And one thing about playing Atlanta, all it takes is, you can move. Carolina's in that game until the 4th quarter. Think about that.
Yeah, correct. Before we say goodbye, names to look out for. We've had big names moved, and the trade deadline, we still have some time, but just give me a couple names on the way out to look out for.
Well, I think Uche is definitely going to get moved. I think obviously Mike Williams, but I think more than just names, I think certain teams. I think Carolina, Miles Sanders, what are they doing with him? Just trade him. Get him off your team. You're not abusing him. They could trade him. Some team, Dallas could use Miles Sanders. I know he makes a lot of money, but I think, those are the kind of players that you got to go after. Teams that are going to be at the end where they know they're not going to win, where you can go take advantage of them, And I think like what they did with Davante Adams, you get off the hook for the salary.
All right, the big guy's busy. On to McAfee, Russo, the rest of the schedule. Michael, enjoy it. This has been an Elliott production he's a Richardson truther like you've never heard about.
All the way,
but you have to start Flacco. Anyway,
he wears his jersey for
Monday.
GM Podcast. Yeah, he wears it for the Shuffle Pod.
GM Shuffle.